The twin sons of Sarath were dying, and Commander Velith Sorin thought it was the most beautiful thing she had seen in 17 conquests. She stood at the observation deck of the Pale Dominion, her flagship, watching the binary stars bleed their last light across the void. One burned a deep, furious crimson. The other had faded to a sickly amber, like an old bruise refusing to heal. In perhaps 1,000 years, they would collapse into each other and birth something new. She wondered, not for the first time, if empires died the same way. "High Blade," came a voice behind her, and she did not turn. She knew that voice. Torek Vaughn, her chief strategist, ancient and irritating, and somehow still alive after serving 3 commanders before her. He had a talent for survival that she suspected was less about skill and more about being too annoying for death to bother with. "What is it, Torek?" "We recovered something from the debris field. A ship. Single pilot, human design, no identification markers." He paused, and she could hear the dry amusement in his voice. "The pilot is alive, which I'm told is unusual for someone drifting in dead space for what our analysts estimate was 6 days. Velith turned then, her blue skin catching the dying light of the suns, her long ears tilting slightly forward in the way they did when she was interested despite herself. "Human. Very much so, unconscious but breathing. My recommendation is to space him and be done with it. Humans are more trouble than they're worth, in my experience. They have this irritating habit of not dying when they should. Your recommendation is noted." She moved past him, her boots clicking against the metal floor. "Bring him to Kethvorn. I will question him myself." Torek's footsteps followed her. "The War Temple. High Blade, with respect. We have perfectly functional interrogation facilities on board this ship. Facilities with climate control and proper lighting, and a distinct lack of ancient bones staring at you from the walls. The temple has atmosphere. The temple has atmosphere that smells like 10,000 years of death and religious fervor. I've cataloged at least 6 distinct types of mold growing in the lower chambers." Velith allowed herself the ghost of a smile, though she did not let him see it. "Then you should feel right at home, old man. You're nearly as ancient." "I am 147 years old," Torek said with dignity. "That is barely middle-aged by Etherian standards. And yet you complain like someone twice that. Complaining is the privilege of advisors. It's in the official documentation, page 412, subsection 9. She did not respond, but she felt something ease in her chest. This was why she kept Torek close, despite his tendency to question her decisions. He reminded her that she was still capable of something like humor, still capable of conversation that did not revolve around death and duty. It was a small thing, but small things were all that remained to her now. The human was brought to Kethvorn the following day. Velith watched from the shadows of the great hall as her warriors dragged him through the obsidian doors, his body limp, his head hanging. He was smaller than she expected, lean and unremarkable, with dark hair that fell across a face she could not yet read. The warriors chained him to the iron ring at the center of the hall, beneath the vaulted ceiling where the bones of dead gods hung like grotesque chandeliers. Then they withdrew, leaving her alone with her prisoner. She waited. The sons of Sarath crept across the sky, their light filtering through the narrow windows and painting strange patterns on the black stone floor. She watched the human's breathing, slow and steady, the rise and fall of his chest. She studied his hands, his shoulders, the way he held himself even in unconsciousness. There was something in his stillness that troubled her, though she could not say what. When he finally opened his eyes, she was standing before him, arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. He looked at her. Not with fear, not with hatred, not with the desperate hope she had seen in so many prisoners before. He simply looked, as though cataloging her the same way she was cataloging him. His eyes were a pale gray, almost silver in the dying light, and they held a patience that seemed entirely wrong for a man in chains. "Commander Velith Sorin," he said. His voice was rough from disuse but steady. "High Blade of the Etherian Conquest Fleet, conqueror of 17 worlds. He paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I've heard you're very good at your job. She had not expected him to speak first. She had certainly not expected him to know her name. You have me at a disadvantage, she said. You know who I am, but I do not know who you are. Cassius Wren, pilot. Currently unemployed, given that my ship is debris and my employer is several systems away. He shifted his weight, testing the chains, his movements casual rather than desperate. Nice temple, by the way, very atmospheric. I especially like the bones. Are those decorative or functional? Velith stared at him. In 17 conquests, she had interrogated hundreds of prisoners. Soldiers, diplomats, spies, civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. All of them had reacted to their captivity with some variation of fear or defiance. None of them had complimented her interior design. They are the remains of the gods we overthrew, she said, because she did not know what else to say. 10,000 years ago, my people rose against our divine rulers and claimed our destiny for ourselves. Impressive. Most species just write strongly worded letters to their deities. He glanced up at the ceiling where a massive skull hung suspended by chains of dark metal. That one looks upset. Did he take it personally? She, Velith corrected, and immediately wondered why she had bothered. The goddess of silent judgment. It is said she could see the truth in any soul. Could she? That sounds exhausting. I can barely see the truth in a restaurant menu. He lowered his gaze back to her, and again she felt that strange sensation of being studied, measured, weighed by eyes that should have held nothing but terror. So what happens now, Commander? Torture, execution, a strongly worded lecture about the futility of resistance. She should have been angry. She should have ordered him beaten for his insolence, should have demonstrated the cost of mocking the high blade of the Etherian fleet. Instead, she found herself intrigued. Now, she said, you tell me what you were doing in dead space with a ship that has no identification and navigation systems that have been deliberately wiped. I was drifting, rather peacefully, until your people interrupted. Why? I'm not entirely sure. I think I took a wrong turn somewhere around the Verath Nebula. Space is confusing. Everything looks the same. Velith moved closer, close enough to see the faint scars on his hands, the way his fingers were calloused in patterns that spoke of training she could not identify. You are lying. I'm being evasive. There's a difference. Lying implies I'm telling you something false. Evasion just means I'm not telling you something true. The result is the same. The result is that you don't have what you want, but the journey is entirely different. He smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost warm. I find the journey matters. She did not return the smile. I will find out what you are hiding, Cassius Wren. I have broken stronger wills than yours. I don't doubt it. His smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more searching. But I wonder, Commander, if you've ever asked yourself why you need to break anyone at all. 3 weeks felt like 3 months in the War Temple of Kethvorn. Velith had stopped counting the interrogation sessions somewhere around the 15th, when she realized that she was no longer visiting the human to extract information, but simply to talk. This realization troubled her more than she was willing to admit, so she buried it beneath duty and routine and the endless demands of command. The human remained irritatingly alive. More irritating still, he remained irritatingly calm. She had tried silence, letting hours pass without speaking, watching him from her throne of black stone. He had spent the time examining the ceiling, occasionally commenting on the architectural choices of her ancestors. She had tried pressure, keeping him awake for days, depriving him of food and water. He had grown pale and weak but never desperate, and when she finally relented, he had thanked her for the water with genuine politeness that made her want to throw something at him. You are the most frustrating prisoner I have ever held, she told him on the 18th day, standing before him in the great hall while the dying light of the twin suns painted everything in shades of blood and amber. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment, Cassius said. He looked thinner than when he had arrived, the angles of his face sharper, but his eyes remained the same, patient, watchful, entirely too perceptive. Competition must have been fierce. It was not a compliment. And yet here we are, day 18, still having conversations. If I were truly frustrating, you would have executed me by now. He shifted his weight, chains clinking softly. I think you enjoy our little talks, Commander. I think I'm the most interesting thing that's happened to you in months. She should have denied it. She should have reminded him of his place, of the power she held over his life and death. Instead, she found herself sitting on the steps below her throne, close enough to see the flecks of darker gray in his silver eyes. You know nothing of my life. I know you spend more time with a chained prisoner than with your officers. I know you come here at night, when the temple is empty, and stand at the windows watching those dying suns. I know you ask me questions about human philosophy and listen to my answers as though they matter. He paused, and something softened in his expression. I know loneliness when I see it, Velith, even when it wears a commander's uniform. It was the first time he had used her name without her title. It should have been an offense worthy of punishment. Instead, it felt like something else entirely, something warm and unwelcome, like sunlight finding its way into a room that had been dark for too long. You presume too much, she said, but there was no heat in her voice. Probably. It's a character flaw. I've been told I have several. He smiled, that strange, disarming smile that made him look younger than his scars suggested. My personal favorite is my inability to stay quiet when staying quiet would be the smart thing to do. What about you, Commander? What are your character flaws? I do not have character flaws. I am High Blade of the Etherian Conquest Fleet. Ah, so perfection is a job requirement. That sounds exhausting. Do you get vacation days, or is it constant perfection year-round? She felt her lips twitch despite herself. There is a mandatory contemplation period during the Festival of Fallen Stars. 3 days of meditation and ritual fasting. That sounds less like vacation and more like punishment. Humans have vacation too. We typically spend it lying on beaches and consuming inadvisable amounts of alcohol. That sounds inefficient. That's the point. Efficiency is what we're escaping from. He tilted his head, studying her. When was the last time you did something inefficient, Commander? Something just because you wanted to, not because it served the Empire or advanced your position or fulfilled some ancient obligation. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant hum of the temple's environmental systems and the soft creak of ancient stone settling into itself. I don't remember, she finally admitted, and the confession felt like a wound opening. Cassius nodded, as though this was exactly what he had expected. That's the problem with empires. They consume everything, including the people who build them. You've given 17 worlds to your dominion, Velith. What have you kept for yourself? She did not answer. She could not answer. Because the truth was that she had kept nothing, had given everything to the endless hunger of conquest, and somewhere along the way she had forgotten that there was supposed to be something left at the end. A purpose, a meaning, a reason beyond simple momentum. The question haunted her through the following days. She found herself distracted during strategy meetings, her mind wandering to the human in chains and the uncomfortable truths he spoke with such casual precision. Her officers noticed. Torek von noticed most of all, his ancient eyes following her with concern she did not want to acknowledge. "You're spending too much time with that prisoner," he said one evening, finding her in the corridor outside the great hall. "People are beginning to talk. Let them talk. I am High Blade. My decisions are not subject to their approval. Your decisions, no, but your reputation is another matter." He fell into step beside her, his movements slow but deliberate. "Lord Kethan Voss has petitioned the Hollow Empire for your removal. He claims your methods are inefficient, your conquests too costly in resources and personnel." Velith stopped walking. Voss is a coward and a politician. He has never held a command position in his life. Voss is a coward and a politician with powerful friends. The Hollow Empire listens to those with powerful friends. Tarek's voice was gentle, which somehow made his words worse. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because you need to be careful. There are forces moving against you, and your attention is elsewhere. My attention is exactly where it needs to be. Is it? He stopped at the entrance to the great hall, where the massive obsidian doors stood closed against the night. What is it about this human that fascinates you so? He's a pilot, nothing more. A curiosity at best, a waste of resources at worst. Velith looked at those doors, thinking of the man who waited beyond them. He asks questions, she said slowly. Questions I have been avoiding for a very long time. Torek was silent for a moment. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with years and experience. Questions are dangerous things, High Blade. They have a way of leading to answers we're not prepared to hear. He left her there, standing alone in the corridor, the weight of his warning settling over her like a shroud. She knew he was right. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, allowing a prisoner to see past her armor, to find the cracks she had spent a lifetime concealing. But she could not stop. Something in Cassius Wren called to something in her, something she had thought long dead, and she was not ready to bury it again. The attack came 3 nights later during the Hour of Bone, when the temple's ancient defensive wards cycled to their lowest power. Velith was in her quarters, reading reports she could not concentrate on when the first explosion shook the walls. She was on her feet instantly, blade in hand, years of training overriding thought. The corridors were chaos. Her warriors fought against shadows, figures in dark armor moving with terrible precision, their weapons humming with the distinctive frequency of void tech. Hollow Empire assassins. The best killers in known space, reserved for targets of the highest importance. Someone had paid an enormous price to see her dead tonight. She cut through 2 of them before reaching the great hall, her blade singing through the air, her heart's pounding with the familiar rhythm of combat. But there were too many, and she was alone, her guards scattered or dead, the temple burning around her. A blade found her side, slipping between the plates of her armor, and she fell to her knees on the cold stone floor. The assassins surrounded her, 5 of them, faceless behind their masks, their weapons raised for the killing blow. She looked up at the bones of dead gods and thought with bitter irony that at least she would die in appropriate company. Then she heard the chains break. The sound was wrong. Chains did not simply break, not the void-forged restraints used by the Etherian military, designed to hold prisoners with strength enough to tear through bulkheads. They required specific frequencies to unlock, codes known only to commanding officers. And yet Velith heard them fall, heard the heavy links strike the stone floor with a finality that seemed to echo through the burning hall. She tried to rise, but her body refused. The wound in her side was worse than she had thought, blood pooling beneath her, warm and slick against the cold obsidian. The assassins had heard it too, turning from her toward the source of the sound, their weapons shifting to new targets. She saw confusion in their stances, hesitation in their movements. They had not expected another threat. Cassius Wren moved through them like something from a nightmare. She had thought him weak, diminished by weeks of captivity, starved and exhausted, a pilot with no combat training worth mentioning. She had been wrong, so terribly, fundamentally wrong. He flowed between the assassins like water through cracks in stone, his movements precise and economical, each strike finding vital points with surgical accuracy. One fell before the others could react, throat collapsed by a blow that seemed almost gentle. A second spun away clutching a shattered arm, weapon clattering uselessly to the floor. The third managed to raise her blade before he was inside her guard, and then she was falling too, and he was already moving to the 4th. It took perhaps 12 seconds. Velith counted them, each heartbeat marking another body hitting the ground, another assassin who would never report back to their masters. When it was done, Cassius stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by the dead, his breathing only slightly elevated. He was bleeding from a cut on his forearm, but he did not seem to notice. He turned to look at her. In the flickering light of the burning temple, his face was unreadable. The patient humor she had grown accustomed to was gone, replaced by something harder, colder, a mask beneath the mask she had thought she knew. He walked toward her, and she saw that he had taken a blade from one of the fallen assassins, its edge still humming with void energy. She understood then. Everything crystallized into terrible clarity, the weeks of evasion and deflection, the questions he had asked, the way he had studied her. He was not a pilot. He had never been a pilot. He was something far more dangerous, something sent specifically for her, and she had invited him into her home and told him her secrets and let him see her weakness. He stopped before her, blade in hand, looking down at her with those silver eyes that had fooled her so completely. "You were never a prisoner," she said. Her voice was steady despite everything. She would not give him the satisfaction of hearing her fear. "No. You were sent to kill me." "Yes." She laughed, and the sound surprised her, bitter and sharp in the smoke-filled air. "I suppose I should compliment your patience. 3 weeks is a long time to wait for a single assassination. The timing had to be right. You're not an easy target, Commander. I needed to understand your routines, your security protocols, the weaknesses in your defenses." He paused, and something flickered across his expression, too fast for her to read. "I needed to understand you. And now you do." "Now I do." The blade hummed between them, hungry and waiting. Velith looked at it, then at the man who held it, and felt a strange calm settle over her. She had always known she would die violently. It was the fate of conquerors, the price of the life she had chosen. She had simply not expected it to come from someone she had almost begun to trust. "Then finish it," she said. "I will not beg, I will not plead. If you wanted fear from me, you should have struck while I was ignorant." Cassius raised the blade. She watched it rise, watched the light play along its edge, watched his hand tighten around the grip. She thought of the 17 worlds she had conquered, the millions who had died at her command, the empire she had built through blood and fire. Perhaps this was justice. Perhaps this was simply the universe correcting an imbalance. The blade reached its apex. His arm tensed for the killing stroke, and then he stopped. She saw it happen, saw the moment of decision crystallize in his eyes. Something broke through the cold mask he wore, something raw and uncertain and almost painful to witness. His hand trembled just slightly, a vibration she would not have noticed if she had not been waiting for death. "Why?" he asked, and his voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Why what?" "Varath Minor, 3 years ago. You were ordered to raise the primary settlement, including the medical facilities. You destroyed everything else, but you let the hospital stand. Why?" She stared at him. Of all the questions she had expected in her final moments, this was not among them. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything about you, Commander. Every conquest, every battle, every decision you've made since you took command." The blade wavered, still raised but no longer certain. "But I don't understand that one. It doesn't fit. You've never shown mercy before or since. Why then? Why that hospital?" She could have lied. She could have claimed strategy, some tactical advantage she had preserved. But she was dying anyway, bleeding out on the floor of her ancestors' temple, and there seemed little point in deception now. "There were children," she said, "sick children in the terminal ward. I saw them through the window when we were clearing the building." She paused, remembering faces she had tried so hard to forget. They were already dying. The disease was beyond our medicine, beyond anyone's medicine. They had weeks left, perhaps days, and I thought. She trailed off, searching for words that had never been spoken aloud. "I thought they deserved to die in their beds with their families beside them, not in fire, not because I was following orders. That was a weakness. Your commanders could have had you executed for disobeying." "Yes, but you did it anyway." "Yes." Cassius lowered the blade. He stood there for a long moment, looking at her as though seeing her for the first time, as though all those weeks of conversation had been preparation for this single moment of truth. The fire crackled around them, the temple groaning as ancient stones shifted in the heat. Somewhere distant, she heard shouting, her warriors finally rallying to respond to the attack. "I was supposed to kill you," he said. "Everything I've done for the past 3 years, every mission, every target, it was all leading to this. You're responsible for the deaths of millions. You're a monster, by any reasonable definition of the word. I know what I am. Do you?" He knelt beside her, close enough that she could see the conflict written in every line of his face. "Because I've been watching you for weeks, Commander, and I'm not sure you do. I think there's something in you that the monster hasn't consumed yet. Something that looked at dying children and chose mercy when mercy meant risking everything. A single act of weakness does not redeem a lifetime of cruelty." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't, but it means redemption might be possible someday if you survive long enough to seek it." He pressed his hand against the wound in her side, applying pressure, and she gasped at the pain. His other hand found her wrist, checking her pulse with professional efficiency. "What are you doing?" she demanded, something monumentally stupid. He looked toward the doors, calculating distances and threats. "Your warriors are coming. When they arrive, you'll tell them I escaped during the attack. You'll say nothing about what happened here, nothing about what I am or what I was sent to do." "Why would I protect you?" He smiled then, and it was the same smile she remembered from their conversations, warm and slightly sad. "Because I'm asking you to. And because, against all evidence and common sense, I think you might actually be worth saving." He stood, blade still in hand, and moved toward the shadows at the far end of the hall. She watched him go, too weak to follow, too confused to call out. At the edge of the darkness, he paused and looked back at her. "Survive, Velith," he said. "Survive and find me, I'll be waiting." Then he was gone, vanishing into the burning night, leaving her alone with the dead and the impossible question of why she was still alive. She healed slower than she should have. The medics blamed the Void Tech blade, its energy disrupting cellular regeneration, leaving traces of quantum interference in the wound. Velith accepted this explanation because it was easier than admitting the truth. The truth was that she did not want to heal. She wanted to lie in the medical bay of the Pale Dominion and stare at the ceiling and think about a human who had held her life in his hands and chosen to let her keep it. Torek visited her on the 3rd day, carrying a datapad and wearing an expression that suggested he had news she would not enjoy. He settled into the chair beside her bed with the careful movements of someone whose joints had seen better centuries, and for a long moment he simply looked at her. "You're going to tell me something unpleasant," she said. "I can see it in your face. I'm 147 years old. Everything in my face is unpleasant." He activated the datapad, scrolling through information she could not see from her angle. "The Hollow Empire has formally stripped you of command. Lord Voss presented evidence to the Council that you allowed an enemy operative to escape during the attack on Kethforn. They've declared you a traitor to the Etherian Dominion." She had expected this. She had been expecting it since she woke in the medical bay and realized that survival came with complications. What evidence? Security footage from the temple. Partial, damaged by the fire, but clear enough to show you conversing with the human before he fled. The Council has interpreted this as collaboration. I was bleeding out on the floor. I was hardly in a position to collaborate with anyone. Logic has never been the Hollow Empire's strength. Politics, however, is another matter. Torek set down the datapad and met her eyes. "Your fleet has been seized. Your officers have been arrested and are awaiting interrogation. Your name has been struck from the rolls of honor, and there is a substantial bounty on your head. You are, as of this morning, the most wanted fugitive in Etherian space." Velith absorbed this information with a detachment that surprised her. She had spent her entire adult life building her position, climbing through the ranks of the military hierarchy, conquering worlds to prove her worth. All of it was gone now, erased by a single night of fire and impossible choices. She should have felt devastated. Instead, she felt something closer to relief, as though a weight she had carried so long she had forgotten it was there had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "I suppose I should be upset," she said. "Most people would be." "I am not most people." "No," Torek's voice softened, the dry humor giving way to something more genuine. "You never have been. It's why I've served you as long as I have." He leaned forward, lowering his voice despite the privacy of the medical bay. "I've prepared a ship for you. Small, fast, untraceable. It's waiting in the secondary hangar, registered under a false identification that should hold up to casual inspection." "You're helping me escape. That makes you a traitor as well." "I've been a traitor to someone or other for most of my career. It's practically a tradition at this point." He smiled, the expression carving deeper lines into his ancient face. "Besides, I've been wanting to retire for decades. This seems as good an excuse as any." "You're coming with me." "Absolutely not. I'm far too old for running and hiding. I plan to stay here, make a nuisance of myself, and die in my bed surrounded by enemies who are too afraid of my reputation to actually harm me." He stood, joints creaking in protest. "But I did take the liberty of loading your ship with supplies and a rather extensive intelligence file on your human friend. He's quite famous, you know, in certain circles. Goes by at least a dozen names. Has been credited with the destabilization of 3 governments, the assassination of 2 warlords, and the complete disappearance of a criminal syndicate that controlled half the outer reaches." Velith pushed herself upright, ignoring the pain in her side. "You knew what he was." "I suspected. The way he moved, the way he held himself, even in chains. I've seen trained killers before." He had the look. Torek moved toward the door, then paused. "I should tell you not to go after him. I should tell you that pursuing the man who was sent to kill you is the height of foolishness. But I've known you for 15 years, Velith, and I know you're going to do it anyway. So instead I'll simply say this: be careful. Not everyone who spares your life does so out of kindness." "Then why did he do it?" "That's the question, isn't it?" He opened the door, letting in the sterile light of the corridor beyond. "Find him and ask. Just try not to die in the process. I've invested too much time in keeping you alive to see it wasted now." He left without saying goodbye. Velith suspected this was intentional, that the old man could not bear the weight of formal farewells. She understood. She felt the same way. The ship was exactly where Torek had promised, a sleek courier vessel designed for speed rather than combat. Velith boarded under the cover of a shift change, her face hidden beneath a hood, her presence unremarked by the skeleton crew maintaining the hangar. Within the hour, she was in open space, the pale Dominion shrinking behind her, the only home she had known for a decade becoming just another point of light among millions. She spent the first day of her flight reading the intelligence file on Cassius Wren. It was extensive, contradictory, and deeply troubling. He had been born on a colony world called New Meridian, orphaned at 6 when a resource war destroyed his settlement, recruited at 12 by an organization that trained children to become weapons. His handlers called him the Quiet, a name that had followed him through 2 decades of impossible operations. He had killed senators and generals, broken siege lines and toppled regimes. He was, by any measure, one of the most dangerous individuals in known space, and he had let her live. She traced his movements after the attack on Kethforn, following fragmentary reports and rumored sightings across the spiral arm. He was not hiding, she realized. He was traveling with purpose, following a route that seemed almost deliberate, as though he wanted to be found. The thought should have made her suspicious. Instead, it made her curious. The trail led her through contested territories and neutral zones, past dying stars and thriving colonies, through the spaces between empires where law was a suggestion and survival was the only currency that mattered. She stopped at stations to refuel and gather information, always careful, always watching. The bounty on her head grew with each passing week, attracting hunters and opportunists who saw her as an easy payday. None of them succeeded. She had not become High Blade by being easy to kill. On the 43rd day of her pursuit, she found him. The station was called Meridian's Rest, a neutral port on the edge of known space where criminals and refugees and those who wished to be neither gathered to trade in goods and secrets. Velith walked through its crowded corridors with her hood raised, scanning faces, searching for silver eyes among the countless strangers. She found him in a bar on the lower levels, sitting alone at a table in the corner, drinking something amber-colored from a glass that had seen better decades. He looked up as she approached and he smiled. 43 days, he said. I expected you sooner. I was being thorough. She sat across from him, keeping her hands visible on the table, and I was healing. How's the wound? It aches when the atmospheric pressure changes. The medics say it will fade with time. They usually do. He pushed a second glass toward her, already filled. I took the liberty of ordering for you. It's called Sunfire Whiskey. Humans make it from fermented grain and regret. You'll probably hate it. She picked up the glass, studied the liquid within, then drank it in a single swallow. It burned going down, harsh and bright, leaving warmth in its wake. It's terrible, she said. I know, that's part of the charm. He refilled her glass from a bottle she had not noticed. So, you found me, what now? Now you answer my questions. I've been answering your questions for weeks. It didn't seem to get either of us anywhere productive. These are different questions. She leaned forward, holding his gaze. Why did you spare me, Cassius? The truth this time, not philosophy, not deflection, the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, turning his own glass in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than she had ever heard it. Because I looked at you lying there, bleeding, ready to die without begging, and I saw something I recognized. Something I thought I'd lost a long time ago. He looked up at her, and his eyes held none of their usual humor. I saw someone who was tired of being a weapon, and I couldn't kill that. Not when I've been searching for it in myself for 20 years. They sat in that bar until the station's artificial night gave way to artificial dawn, talking as they had talked in the temple, but different now. There were no chains between them, no roles of captor and captive, only two people who had been shaped into weapons and were trying to remember what they had been before. Velith told him about Verath Minor, about the children in the hospital, about the way their faces had haunted her through every conquest that followed. Cassius told her about New Meridian, about the flames that had taken his family, about the years of training that had carved away everything soft until only the killer remained. I used to think I was saving people, he said, staring into his empty glass. The targets I was given, they were always monsters, warlords, slavers, men who had built their empires on suffering. I told myself I was making the galaxy better, one death at a time. And now I'm not sure there's a difference between the monsters and the people who send me to kill them. They're all playing the same game. They just wear different masks. Velith thought of the Hollow Empire, of Lord Voss and his political machinations, of the council that had stripped her rank and declared her traitor for the crime of surviving. I used to believe in the conquest, she said. I used to believe we were bringing order to chaos, civilization to the uncivilized. It was easier when I believed. Belief usually is. The bartender, a four-armed Rilkari with cybernetic eyes, approached to inform them that they had been sitting at his table for 9 hours and would need to order more drinks or vacate the premises. Cassius ordered another bottle of the terrible whiskey, and the Rilkari retreated with an expression that suggested he had seen stranger things in his establishment, but not by much. What happens now? Velith asked, the same question he had asked her in the temple, their positions reversed. I have no idea. My handlers have almost certainly disavowed me. My mission is failed, my cover is burned, and every intelligence agency in the Spiral Arm probably wants to have a very unpleasant conversation with me. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I've been a weapon for so long I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. We could figure it out together. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. She had not planned to say them, had not even consciously thought them until they were already spoken. But they felt right in a way that very few things in her life had felt right, and she did not take them back. Cassius studied her face for a long moment. "You're offering to run away with the man who was sent to assassinate you. That's either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both. Humans are not the only species capable of inadvisable decisions." He laughed, genuine and warm, and something in his expression shifted. "Where would we even go? There's nowhere in known space where one or both of us isn't wanted." Then we go beyond known space. The outer reaches, past the edge of the spiral arm. The charts become unreliable out there, and empires lose interest in chasing ghosts through uncharted systems. That's a long journey, dangerous. We might not survive it. We might not. She reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had touched him without violence between them. His fingers were warm, calloused, marked with the same scars of combat that marked her own. "But I would rather face the unknown with someone I trust than return to the certainty of what I was." "You trust me?" "No, but I think I could learn to, given time." He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with one finger, a gesture so intimate that she felt herself flush in a way she had not experienced in decades. "I should warn you," he said. "I'm terrible company on long voyages. I talk too much, I cook badly, and I have a tendency to wake up screaming from nightmares about all the people I've killed. I conquered 17 worlds. I suspect my nightmares are worse than yours." "Is that a competition?" "Etherians are very competitive. It's a cultural trait." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. "Then I accept, on one condition." "What condition?" "That we stop somewhere along the way and get proper food. I've been living on station rations for weeks, and I'm fairly certain they're made from recycled atmosphere filters and despair." The journey to the outer reaches took 3 months. They traveled in Velith's courier ship, which Cassius insisted on renaming the Second Chance despite her protests that it was sentimental and impractical. He won the argument by pointing out that she had kept him alive for 3 weeks when she should have executed him on the first day, which suggested she had a sentimental streak whether she admitted it or not. She had no effective counter to this logic, so the Second Chance it became. They were pursued, of course. Bounty hunters found them at a refueling station in the Kethris Nebula, and Velith and Cassius fought side by side for the first time, their movements finding a rhythm that felt almost natural. Etherian warships intercepted them near the Vorn Passage, and they escaped through an asteroid field that should have torn their ship apart, Cassius piloting, while Velith managed the shields and pretended not to be terrified. A former colleague of Cassius's, a woman with chrome implants and a personal grudge, ambushed them on a colony world called Haven's End, and they survived through a combination of skill, luck, and what Velith could only describe as mutual stubbornness. Through it all, they talked. They argued about philosophy and strategy, about the nature of redemption and whether either of them deserved it. They shared meals in the cramped galley of the ship, learning each other's tastes and habits. They stood together at the viewport, watching unfamiliar stars drift past, and sometimes they did not speak at all because words were not necessary. Velith learned that Cassius snored when he was exhausted, and that he hoarded terrible novels on his datapad. Cassius learned that Velith sang to herself when she thought she was alone, and that she had memorized the names of every officer who had died under her command. They were not easy discoveries, not comfortable ones, but they were honest, and honesty had become more valuable to both of them than comfort. On the 87th day of their journey, they crossed the boundary of known space. The stars here were strange, configurations that appeared on no chart, systems that had never been catalogued or claimed. The ship's sensors filled with data that had no context, no reference points, no history. They were truly in the unknown now, beyond the reach of empires and assassins and the ghosts of who they had been. Velith stood at the viewport, watching a nebula bloom in colors she had no names for. Cassius joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders touched, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "I never thanked you," she finally said, "for sparing me in the temple. You don't need to thank me. I'm not sure I did it for noble reasons." "What reasons, then?" He considered the question, his reflection ghosting across the viewport alongside hers. "I think I was hoping you would become something different, something that would prove the choice was right." He turned to look at her, and his expression was open in a way she had rarely seen. "Have you become something different?" She thought about the question seriously, the way she had learned to think about the questions he asked. She was no longer High Blade, no longer a conqueror, no longer the monster she had been. But she was not yet something else, not fully formed, still raw and uncertain and searching. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm trying. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything." He reached out, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her long ear, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "That's all any of us can do, Velith. Try to be better than we were. Try to deserve the second chances we're given." She leaned into his touch, allowing herself this small vulnerability. "And if we fail, then we try again. That's what second chances are for." The nebula swirled beyond the viewport, ancient light painting their faces in shades of violet and gold. Somewhere behind them, empires continued their endless wars, assassins hunted ghosts, and the galaxy spun on without them. But here, in this small ship on the edge of everything, two weapons who had chosen to become people stood together and faced the unknown. Velith did not know what the future held. She did not know if redemption was possible, if the blood on her hands could ever be washed clean, if she and Cassius would survive the uncharted reaches,